The scanning devices showed nothing unusual about the third planet in this system. Commander Reth adjusted his position in the command chair, his scaled fingers tapping against the armrest in a steady rhythm. For 3 cycles, the Galactic Council had received strange reports about a new species calling themselves humans. The reports made little sense. A species that built weapons but refused to use them properly. A military force that helped their enemies instead of destroying them. Reth had read every file about these creatures. Most council members dismissed the reports as translation errors or propaganda. No intelligent species would limit their own power in warfare. It went against every natural law of survival. The strong conquered the weak. The smart destroyed the stupid. The prepared eliminated the unprepared. This was how the galaxy worked. His ship, the Iron Logic, hung in space near the human colony world they called New Terra. The planet looked peaceful from orbit. Green and blue swirls covered most of the surface. No massive defense platforms. No weapon satellites. No military installations visible from space. Either these humans were incredibly stupid or incredibly confident. The communication officer turned toward Reth. Her 4 arms worked the controls while her main eyes stayed focused on the display. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." "Put it through," Reth ordered. The main screen flickered and showed a human face. The creature had pale skin, short dark hair, and only 2 eyes positioned close together. Strange design, but not the strangest Reth had seen. The human wore a simple blue uniform with metal symbols on the chest. "Greetings," the human said. "I am Admiral Stone of the New Terra Defense Force. We welcome you to our system. We understand you represent the Galactic Council." Reth leaned forward. Most species tried to hide their military leaders during first contact. This human introduced himself as a military commander immediately. "I am Commander Reth of the Galactic Enforcement Fleet. We are here to evaluate your civilization for potential council membership." Admiral Stone smiled, showing white teeth. Another strange design choice. "We would be honored to host your evaluation team. Would you like to visit our planet? We can show you our cities, our culture, and our military capabilities." The words hit Reth like a plasma bolt. Show their military capabilities? What species offered to reveal their defenses to strangers? This had to be a trap. "You wish to demonstrate your weapons to us?" "Of course," Stone replied. "Transparency builds trust. We have nothing to hide from the Council. You can see everything we do and how we do it." Reth's tactical mind raced through possibilities. Maybe the humans planned to show fake weapons while hiding their real ones. Maybe they wanted to lure his team to the surface for capture. Maybe they were so primitive they didn't understand the danger of revealing military secrets. "We accept your invitation," Reth said carefully. "I will bring a small evaluation team." "Excellent. We will prepare quarters for your group and arrange tours of our facilities. I think you will find our approach to military service quite interesting." The transmission ended. Reth stared at the empty screen for several moments. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Berg, approached the command chair. Berg was young but showed promise in tactical thinking. "Commander, this seems too easy," Berg said. "No species volunteers to show their weapons to potential enemies." "I agree," Reth replied. "But the Council needs accurate information about these humans. We will proceed with caution." 2 hours later, Reth found himself standing on the surface of New Terra. The transport had landed at what the humans called a military base. Reth expected massive walls, guard towers, and weapon emplacements. Instead, he saw low buildings scattered across green fields. Human soldiers walked around without armor or visible weapons. Some were playing games on grass areas. Others sat in groups talking and laughing. Admiral Stone met them at the landing pad. Up close, the human looked smaller than Reth expected. Most species grew their military leaders large and intimidating. Stone barely reached Reth's shoulder and showed no obvious muscle development. "Welcome to Forward Base Alpha," Stone said. "This is one of our primary training facilities. We use it to prepare soldiers for peacekeeping operations." Peacekeeping. Another strange human concept that made no sense to Reth. You kept peace by being stronger than everyone else. You didn't need special training for that. They walked toward the main building. Reth noticed human soldiers stopping their activities to watch the alien visitors. None looked afraid or suspicious. Most seemed curious and friendly. A few even waved at the group. "Your soldiers seem very relaxed," Reth observed. "Why shouldn't they be?" Stone asked. "You're guests here, not invaders. Our people understand the difference." Inside the main building, Stone led them to a large room filled with displays and information panels. Maps covered the walls showing human territories throughout the sector. Red marks indicated military units. Blue marks showed civilian populations. Green marks indicated something called humanitarian operations. This is our command center, Stone explained. From here we coordinate all military activities in this sector. Reth studied the displays. The information was incredibly detailed and completely open. Every human military unit was marked with exact numbers and equipment lists. Their supply lines were clearly shown. Their communication networks were mapped out completely. This wasn't a demonstration for guests. This was their actual command center with real operational data. Berg whispered urgently in Reth's ear. Commander, they're showing us everything. Their entire military structure is exposed. Stone overheard and smiled. You're wondering why we're revealing operational secrets, aren't you? The answer is simple. We're not planning to attack anyone, so we don't need to hide our capabilities. Our military exists to protect people, not to conquer them. The words made Reth's head hurt. Military forces existed to project power and control territory. Protection was what happened after you had defeated all possible threats. These humans seem to have the entire concept backward. Tomorrow we will show you our training exercises, Stone continued. You can observe how we prepare our soldiers for combat operations. I think you will find our methods quite educational. That evening, Reth sat in the guest quarters provided by the humans. The room was simple but comfortable. Large windows showed the military base outside. Human soldiers continued their activities even after dark. Some gathered around fires singing songs. Others played sports under artificial lights. A few sat alone reading books or writing messages. Berg entered the room carrying a datapad. Commander, I've been analyzing their facility. Their security is almost non-existent. A single squad could capture this entire base. That's what troubles me, Reth replied. Either these humans are the most foolish species in the galaxy, or they know something we don't. He looked out the window again. A human soldier was helping another one who had fallen during a game. The injured soldier was laughing despite obvious pain. His friends supported him as they walked toward a medical building. Tomorrow we observe their training, Reth said. Perhaps then we will understand what makes these creatures think they can survive in a hostile galaxy. But as he prepared for sleep, Reth couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important about these humans. Something that might change everything he thought he knew about warfare and survival. Dawn brought new confusion for Commander Reth. He woke to find human soldiers exercising in formation outside his window. They moved in perfect coordination, their voices joining in rhythmic chants. The display of discipline impressed him until he noticed something wrong. The soldiers carried no weapons during their exercises. They ran, jumped, and performed combat moves with empty hands. Admiral Stone arrived after breakfast with a cheerful expression. Ready to see how we train our warriors, Commander? They walked to a large field where hundreds of human soldiers were gathered. Reth expected to see weapon drills and combat practice. Instead, he watched humans sitting in circles while instructors talked about something called rules of engagement. The soldiers took notes and asked questions like students in a classroom. What are they studying? Berg whispered. Stone overheard. The laws of war. Every soldier must understand when they can and cannot use force. They learn to identify civilians, medical personnel, and surrender signals. Basic stuff, really. Basic stuff. Reth felt his logical mind struggling with this concept. Warriors needed to know how to kill enemies and break things. Why were these humans learning when not to fight? The instructor on the field held up a white cloth. Who can tell me what this represents? Several soldiers raised their hands. One young female was selected. It's a surrender flag, sir. If an enemy displays a white flag, we must stop firing and accept their surrender. Correct. And what happens to surrendering enemies? We take them prisoner and treat them according to the convention, sir. Convention. Another human word that made no sense to Reth. He had studied thousands of species across the galaxy. When enemies surrendered, smart commanders killed them to prevent future threats. Keeping prisoners alive was wasteful and dangerous. The group moved to a weapons range. Finally, Reth thought, they would see real military training. The humans set up targets and brought out their rifles. The weapons looked crude but functional. Each soldier checked their rifle carefully before taking position. Fire, the instructor commanded. The weapons discharged with sharp cracks. All the targets were hit accurately. The humans were decent marksmen. But then something strange happened. The instructor called a halt to firing while some targets remained undamaged. Why did they stop? Reth asked Stone. Those targets represent civilians and medical personnel, Stone explained. Our soldiers only engage valid military targets. Reth stared at the range. Several targets were clearly marked with red crosses. Others wore different clothing than the military targets. The humans had deliberately avoided shooting them, even during a simple training exercise. But they are just targets, Reth said. Why does it matter what they represent? Stone's expression became serious. Because training creates habits. If our soldiers practice shooting civilians in training, they might make mistakes in real combat. We train the way we intend to fight. The demonstration continued with more bewildering examples. Human soldiers practiced medical aid on pretend wounded enemies. They learned to search prisoners without harming them. They studied maps showing areas where weapons could not be used because civilians lived there. During the afternoon, Stone brought out a thick book and handed it to Reth. The cover read, International Humanitarian Law and Military Operations. This contains our rules for warfare, Stone said. Every soldier carries a copy. They're required to know it completely. Reth opened the book and began reading. The first chapter listed weapons that humans had banned themselves from using. Chemical agents that could kill thousands, biological weapons that could destroy entire populations, explosive bullets designed to cause maximum pain, nuclear devices that could level cities. You possess all these weapons? Reth asked. We know how to make them, Stone replied. Some we've tested in the past. Others exist only in theory, but we've chosen not to use them. The book described rules for every aspect of combat, where weapons could be fired, how prisoners should be treated, what happened to wounded enemies, how civilians should be protected. The list went on for hundreds of pages. Berg read over Reth's shoulder. Commander, according to this, humans refuse to attack hospitals, schools, and religious buildings, even if enemies hide inside them. That's correct, Stone confirmed. Some things are more important than military advantage. Reth felt something break inside his mind. These humans had voluntarily weakened themselves. They had written down exactly how they would limit their own power and given copies to every soldier. It was like handing enemies a guide to defeating you. I don't understand, Reth said finally. Why would any species restrict their own military capabilities? Stone was quiet for a moment. Because we learned what happens when we don't. Come with me. I want to show you something. They walked to another building filled with displays and historical images. The walls showed scenes from human conflicts throughout their history. Reth saw destroyed cities, massive graveyards, and haunting pictures of human suffering. This is what we were like before the rules, Stone said quietly. We fought wars with no limits. We killed anyone who got in our way. We used every weapon we could build, no matter how terrible. The displays showed human weapons that made Reth's scales crawl, poison gas that killed slowly and painfully, firebombs that burned entire cities, diseases created specifically to kill. The humans had been monsters to their own species. The rules didn't make us weak, Stone continued. They made us human. Without them, we would have destroyed ourselves long ago. That evening, Reth sat in his quarters trying to process what he had learned. The humans had built weapons capable of destroying their own planet. Then they had written rules to prevent themselves from using those weapons. They had voluntarily given up military advantages to protect people they had never met. Berg paced the room anxiously. Commander, their entire military philosophy is backwards. They could have conquered this sector easily with the weapons they refused to use. That's exactly the point, Reth replied slowly. They chose not to conquer. He picked up the human law book and read another section. It described how medical personnel should be treated during combat. Enemy doctors and nurses could not be attacked. They could continue treating wounded soldiers from both sides. Human forces were required to protect enemy medical facilities. The concept was so alien that Reth's mind rebelled against it. In every other species he knew, medics were primary targets. Eliminating enemy medical support was basic tactical doctrine. These humans did the opposite. They protected the very people who kept enemy soldiers alive to fight again. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Admiral Stone entered the room carrying 2 cups of steaming liquid. Coffee, Stone explained, offering 1 cup to Reth. I thought you might want to talk about what you saw today. Reth accepted the cup and tasted the bitter liquid. It was surprisingly pleasant. Admiral, I must ask you something directly. Are humans insane? Stone laughed, but not mockingly. That's a fair question. From your perspective, we probably seem crazy. But let me ask you something. How many wars has your species fought in the last 100 years? Reth thought carefully. 17 major conflicts, 43 minor territorial disputes, numerous police actions against pirates and rebels. And how many has humanity fought? According to your records, none in the last 60 years. Stone nodded. The rules work, Commander. The species that seems insane to you is the only one in this sector that has achieved lasting peace. After Stone left, Reth stood at his window looking out at the human base. Soldiers were still active despite the late hour, but they weren't preparing for war. They were playing music, sharing meals, and taking care of equipment. Some were video calling with families on distant worlds. For the first time in his military career, Commander Reth began to wonder if everything he had learned about warfare might be wrong. The transport vehicle hummed quietly as it carried Reth and his team across the human colony. Outside the windows, he watched ordinary humans going about their daily lives. Children played in parks while adults worked in fields and workshops. Nothing suggested a militarized society prepared for constant warfare. Admiral Stone sat across from them, reviewing notes on a datapad. Today you'll see how we handle prisoners and displaced persons. I think this will be particularly educational. They stopped at a large complex surrounded by simple fencing. Unlike the military base, this facility had guards at the entrance. But even the guards seemed relaxed, chatting with people who came and went freely. This is Detention Facility 7, Stone explained as they walked through the main gate. We currently house about 300 prisoners here. Reth expected to see the standard galactic approach to prisoner management. Cramped cells, minimal food, hard labor to offset the cost of keeping enemies alive. Instead, he found himself walking through what looked like a small town. The prisoners lived in individual rooms with real beds, desks, and personal storage. Common areas provided space for recreation and social interaction. A library offered books and educational materials. Gardens grew fresh food that the prisoners tended themselves. These are enemy combatants? Berg asked in disbelief. Former pirates mostly, Stone replied. Some mercenaries who attacked our shipping lanes. A few raiders who hit civilian settlements. They passed a group of prisoners sitting around tables engaged in animated conversation. None wore restraints or prison uniforms. Most looked healthy and well-fed. Some were reading books. Others played games or worked on crafts projects. Why aren't they secured? Reth demanded. These are dangerous criminals. Stone paused at an intersection in the corridor. They are secured. But security doesn't require cruelty. Each prisoner signed an agreement to follow facility rules in exchange for these conditions. Violations result in stricter confinement. And they honor these agreements? Most do. When you treat people with dignity, they tend to respond with cooperation. They entered a medical facility where human doctors were treating prisoners. Reth watched a human physician carefully examining a large, scarred alien who had obviously been a formidable warrior. The doctor's hands moved gently as he checked the prisoner's healing wounds. This patient tried to kill our colonists 3 months ago, Stone said quietly. Dr. Park is giving him the same medical care we provide our own soldiers. The alien prisoner noticed them watching and spoke in accented human language. The human doctors saved my life. My own people would have let me die from infection. Dr. Park looked up from his examination. Medicine doesn't take sides. Injury and disease are the real enemies. Reth felt something cold settle in his stomach. These humans were spending resources to heal people who had tried to kill them. It violated every principle of logical resource management. They moved to another section where prisoners attended classes. Some were learning human languages. Others studied mathematics, science, or technical skills. A few worked on artistic projects, creating paintings and sculptures. You're educating them? Reth asked. Why not? Stone replied. Most became pirates because they had no other options. If we give them useful skills, they might choose different paths when they're released. Released. The word hit Reth like a physical blow. You release prisoners? Of course. After they serve their sentences and complete rehabilitation programs. Berg grabbed Reth's arm and whispered urgently. Commander, this is insane. They're training their enemies to be more effective against them. But Stone overheard. Actually, Lieutenant, we're training former enemies to become productive citizens. Many of our released prisoners now work in colony industries or have started their own businesses. They visited the facility's employment center where prisoners learned job skills, and prepared for reintegration into society. Humans worked alongside former enemies, teaching technical skills and providing emotional support. The next stop proved even more bewildering. The refugee center housed thousands of displaced persons from various conflicts throughout the sector. Families who had lost their homes to war, famine, or natural disasters found shelter here. These people aren't even human, Reth observed, watching the diverse mix of species in the center. Suffering doesn't have a species, Dr. Wells replied. She was the chief medical officer for refugee operations, a small human with gray hair and tired eyes. When someone needs help, we help them. The refugee center operated like a small city. Temporary housing provided privacy and security for families. Schools educated children in multiple languages. Medical clinics treated everything from minor injuries to serious diseases. Job training programs helped adults learn skills useful in human society. Reth watched human volunteers working with alien children, helping them with homework and playing games. The language barriers created communication challenges, but the humans persisted with patience and creativity. Many of these refugees come from species that consider humans inferior, Dr. Wells explained. Some were taught to hate us before they arrived. But desperation tends to overcome prejudice. They visited a workshop where refugees repaired damaged electronics for the colony. A group of insect-like aliens worked alongside human supervisors, their multiple arms giving them advantages in delicate assembly work. The humans had adapted their tools and workstations to accommodate different physiologies. Do you expect these people to become human citizens? Reth asked. Some choose to stay, Dr. Wells replied. Others return to their homeworlds when conditions improve. A few move on to other colonies or stations. We don't require anything except respect for our laws while they're here. The tour continued. To the most disturbing section for Reth, human medical teams were treating wounded soldiers from various conflicts throughout the sector, not human soldiers. Enemy soldiers from species actively fighting against human interests. That pilot bombed one of our settlements last week, Stone said, pointing to a reptilian alien in intensive care. He was shot down by our defense forces. Now our doctors are working around the clock to save his life. The alien pilot was unconscious, connected to multiple life support machines. Human medical staff monitored his condition constantly. Charts showed detailed treatment plans designed to maximize his recovery chances. When he wakes up, he'll be a prisoner, Stone continued. But first, he'll be a patient. Our medical oath requires us to save lives regardless of politics. Berg pulled Reth aside. Commander, I've been calculating the costs. The humans are spending more resources on prisoners and refugees than most species spend on their own military forces. Reth nodded grimly. The numbers were staggering. Food, housing, medical care, education, job training, all provided to people who had no claim on human resources and no ability to repay the costs. That afternoon, they attended a memorial service for human colonists killed in recent pirate raids. Reth expected angry speeches calling for revenge against the attackers. Instead, he heard humans talking about forgiveness and the importance of breaking cycles of violence. We mourn our dead, the colony leader said, but we won't let grief turn us into monsters. Our response to evil must be justice, not vengeance. After the service, Reth found himself alone with Dr. Wells. She was sitting quietly in a garden behind the medical center, looking exhausted. Doctor, may I ask you something? Reth said, of course, and why do you do this? Why spend so much effort on people who aren't your own species? Dr. Wells was quiet for a long moment. Because if we don't, who will? Evil wins when good people decide that helping others is too expensive or too dangerous. She stood and brushed dirt from her clothes. Commander, you seem troubled by what you've seen here. I am, Reth admitted. Your people are difficult to understand. We're difficult to understand because we chose to be different. Most species in the galaxy follow the same patterns. Strength through dominance, security through fear, prosperity through conquest. We tried that approach for thousands of years. It nearly destroyed us. That evening, Reth lay awake in his quarters thinking about everything he had witnessed. The humans treated their enemies better than most species treated their allies. They provided medical care to people who wanted to kill them. They educated prisoners who would likely resume criminal activities. They fed refugees who contributed nothing to human society. By every logical standard, the humans should have been conquered and enslaved long ago. Their resources were scattered across dozens of humanitarian projects. Their military was hampered by countless rules and restrictions. Their society prioritized the welfare of strangers over their own security. Yet somehow they had achieved something no other species in the galaxy had managed. They had turned enemies into friends, not through conquest but through compassion. They had created stability not through fear but through hope. Reth closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Tomorrow, Admiral Stone had promised to show him something even more disturbing. Human weapons that were so terrible, they had banned themselves from ever using them. For the first time in his career, Commander Reth was beginning to fear that his understanding of power itself might be completely wrong. The underground facility stretched far deeper than Reth had expected. Heavy blast doors and multiple security checkpoints marked their descent into what Admiral Stone called the Strategic Assessment Center. Unlike the open, friendly atmosphere of the surface installations, this place felt different. Serious. Dangerous. "Few people are allowed down here," Stone said as they walked through the final checkpoint. "What you're about to see represents humanity's darkest capabilities." The main chamber opened into a vast space filled with displays, computers, and simulation equipment. Human technicians worked at control stations while massive screens showed tactical scenarios and weapon effects calculations. The air hummed with the energy of powerful computers processing unimaginable amounts of data. "This is where we study warfare at its most fundamental level," Stone explained. "Not how to fight current conflicts, but how to prevent future ones." A human scientist approached their group. Dr. Cross was elderly, with white hair and deep lines around his eyes. He moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent decades working with dangerous materials. "Dr. Cross leads our theoretical weapons division," Stone said. "He's going to show you what we've chosen not to use." The first display showed a simple metal sphere about the size of Reth's fist. The object looked harmless, even crude compared to modern energy weapons. But the data surrounding it told a different story. "This is a fusion warhead," Dr. Cross explained, "one of our older designs. The actual device is stored in a secure facility, but we can simulate its effects." He activated the simulation. The screen showed a three-dimensional model of a planet. A single point of light appeared on the surface and began to expand. Within seconds, a sphere of destruction engulfed an area hundreds of kilometers across. The simulated blast wave flattened mountains and boiled oceans. "Yield 50 megatons," Dr. Cross said quietly. "We built hundreds of these during our early space colonization period." Berg stared at the display in shock. "One weapon did all that?" "This was considered a small device," Dr. Cross replied. "We tested much larger ones before we came to our senses." The next simulation showed something called a neutron bomb. The blast was smaller but deadlier. It left buildings intact while killing every living thing within a vast radius. The display showed casualty estimates in the millions from a single detonation. "We never used these in actual warfare," Stone said. "But we came close several times." Reth felt his scales tighten against his skin. The humans had possessed planet-killing weapons for decades and never used them? "Why didn't you deploy these against your enemies?" Dr. Cross exchanged a look with Admiral Stone. "Because we realized that any enemy capable of threatening us would eventually develop similar weapons. Using them would guarantee our own destruction." The tour continued to more disturbing displays. Chemical weapons that could kill entire continents. Biological agents that could destroy all plant life on a world. Nanotechnology that could disassemble matter at the molecular level. "We know how to build all of these," Dr. Cross said. "The science is well understood. The engineering is straightforward. But we've chosen to classify this knowledge as permanently restricted." They stopped at a display showing something called Project Sunbeam. The technical specifications were mostly classified, but Reth could see enough to understand its purpose. "An orbital weapon that could focus stellar energy into a beam capable of cracking planetary crusts. We actually built a prototype," Dr. Cross admitted. "It worked perfectly during testing. We could have sterilized any world in the galaxy." "What happened to it?" Reth asked. "We destroyed it," Stone replied. "And we destroyed all the construction data. Some knowledge is too dangerous to exist." Berg moved closer to Reth and whispered, "Commander, the humans could have conquered the entire galactic sector with these weapons. Why did they give up such power?" The answer came from Dr. Cross, who had overheard. "Because power without wisdom is suicide. We learned that lesson the hard way." The next section contained what Dr. Cross called the Archive of Abandoned Projects, Hundreds of weapon designs that humans had developed and then deliberately discarded, planet crackers that could shatter worlds, mind control devices that could enslave entire species, temporal weapons that could erase enemies from history itself. Every major human research institution contributes to this archive, Dr. Cross explained. When our scientists discover something too dangerous to use, they document it here and then destroy their research. Reth stared at display after display of weapons that could have made humanity the dominant force in the galaxy. Star killers that could collapse suns, dimensional bombs that could tear holes in space itself, plague weapons that could extinct entire species within months. You invented a way to destroy stars? Reth asked weakly. Several ways, actually, Dr. Cross replied. But we realized that any species capable of stellar engineering would eventually learn to restore dead stars. Destroying suns would only delay conflict, not prevent it. They reached a secured viewing chamber where Dr. Cross activated what he called a full-scale simulation. The chamber's walls became transparent, showing space around them. A human fleet faced off against a hostile alien armada 10 times larger. This simulation recreates the Battle of Kepler Station, Dr. Cross said. It was our closest call with total war. The alien fleet in the simulation opened fire with conventional weapons. The human fleet absorbed terrible losses, ship after ship destroyed by overwhelming firepower, just when it seemed the humans would be completely annihilated. New icons appeared on the display. At this point, our commanders requested permission to use strategic weapons, Stone said quietly. Reth watched as fusion warheads eliminated entire sections of the enemy fleet. Biological weapons disabled surviving ships. The alien force that had seemed unstoppable moments before was reduced to scattered debris. We won the battle, Dr. Cross said, but we nearly started a galactic war. Every species in the sector began developing similar weapons to defend against us. The simulation continued, showing the inevitable result. Within 50 years, hundreds of species possessed planet-killing weapons. Small conflicts escalated into system-wide destruction. Entire civilizations were wiped out in hours. The galaxy teetered on the edge of total collapse. This is why we created the laws of war, Stone said. Not to limit our power, but to prevent mutual annihilation. They visited the final section, which Dr. Cross called the Pandora Laboratory. Here, human scientists studied theoretical weapons too dangerous even to simulate. Devices that could rewrite the laws of physics. Weapons that could destroy the universe itself. We don't test these concepts, Dr. Cross explained. We just study whether they're possible. Most of them are, unfortunately. The laboratory contained sealed vaults holding research that would never see practical application. Universe-ending devices that existed only as mathematical equations. Weapons that could unmake reality itself. Why study them if you'll never build them? Reth asked. Because someone else might, Dr. Cross replied grimly. We need to understand these threats in order to defend against them. As they prepared to leave the facility, Admiral Stone brought them to a final display. It showed current human military capabilities compared to what they could deploy if the laws of war were suspended. The difference was staggering. Current human forces used conventional weapons and followed strict rules of engagement. The unrestricted forces could sterilize solar systems and reshape matter at the quantum level. Every human commander carries authorization codes for emergency deployment of strategic weapons, Stone said. If our survival is truly threatened, we can abandon the laws of war. Has that ever happened? Berg asked. Stone was quiet for a moment. Twice. Both times we chose to accept defeat rather than escalate to strategic weapons. That evening, Reth sat in his quarters trying to process what he had learned. The humans possessed weapons that could destroy galaxies, and they had deliberately chosen to fight with conventional arms instead. They had given up ultimate power in exchange for the possibility of lasting peace. His communicator buzzed with an urgent message from Galactic Command. Commander Reth, our deep space monitors have detected weapons tests in your sector. Are the humans developing strategic capabilities? Reth stared at the message for a long time before responding. Negative, Command. The humans are not developing strategic weapons. They're abandoning them. He closed the communicator and walked to his window. Outside, human soldiers were conducting evening training exercises. They moved through combat scenarios using weapons that were laughably primitive compared to what their species could build. For the first time in his military career, Commander Reth began to understand that true strength might have nothing to do with the ability to destroy enemies. The humans had discovered something far more powerful than any weapon. They had learned to choose restraint over revenge, mercy over destruction. But as he prepared for sleep, one thought haunted him. What would happen if someone pushed the humans far enough to make them abandon their laws of war? What would the galaxy face if humanity ever decided that peace was impossible? The answer, he realized, was probably the end of everything. The communication array in Reth's quarters crackled with static as he tried to establish contact with Galactic Command. 3 days had passed since his visit to the Strategic Assessment Center, and sleep had become impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw images of weapons that could crack planets and collapse stars. Weapons that humans had built and then chosen never to use. Galactic Command, this is Commander Reth requesting priority channel. He spoke into the transmitter. The response came after several minutes of routing delays. Commander Reth, this is General Voss. Your reports have been unusual. Command wants clarification on several points. Reth took a deep breath. How could he explain what he had witnessed? General, the humans are unlike any species we have encountered. Their military philosophy defies all conventional understanding. Explain. They possess weapons capable of destroying star systems, yet they refuse to use them. They treat prisoners better than most species treat their own citizens. They spend more resources helping enemies than building defenses. Static filled the channel for several seconds. Commander, are you saying the humans are pacifists? No, sir. They are the most dangerous warriors I have ever encountered, but they have created rules to limit their own destructive potential. That makes no tactical sense, Commander. Reth felt something snap inside his mind. Nothing about these humans makes tactical sense. They could have conquered the galaxy 100 times over, but they choose to grow gardens instead. They could eliminate threats with planet-killing weapons, but they send medical supplies to their enemies. They are either completely insane or operating on a level of strategic thinking that we cannot comprehend. The channel fell silent. When General Voss spoke again, his voice carried concern. Commander, you sound stressed. Perhaps you need to return for debriefing and medical evaluation. I am not stressed, General. I am terrified. The words came out before Reth could stop them. We have been evaluating humanity as a potential threat to galactic stability. But the real threat is what happens if we force them to abandon their self-imposed limitations. Commander, you are not making sense. No species voluntarily limits its military capabilities. Reth laughed, and the sound surprised him. When had laughter become so bitter? That's exactly what I thought, General. But these humans have done something unprecedented. They have achieved ultimate military power and then chosen not to use it. He tried to explain what he had seen in the Strategic Assessment Center. The fusion weapons that could sterilize continents, the biological agents that could extinct entire species, the theoretical devices that could unravel reality itself. And they showed you all of this willingly? General Voss asked. They wanted us to understand why their laws of war exist. They weren't showing off their power. They were demonstrating their restraint. The conversation continued for another hour, but Reth could hear the disbelief in his superior's voice. Command would not accept his reports. They could not comprehend a species that deliberately weakened itself for moral reasons. After ending the communication, Reth sat alone in his quarters. His mind felt fractured, like a piece of equipment overloaded beyond its design limits. Every principle he had learned about warfare and survival had been turned upside down by these humans. Berg entered without being announced, his expression showing the same confusion that Reth felt. Commander, I've been trying to write our mission report. I don't know how to describe what we've seen. What's the problem, Lieutenant? How do I explain to Command that humanity could have destroyed every major civilization in the galaxy, but chose not to? How do I report that they treat captured pirates better than we treat our own veterans? How do I describe weapons so terrible that their inventors destroyed them rather than risk using them? Reth had no answer. The truth about humanity was so far outside normal galactic experience that it might as well be fiction. Admiral Stone arrived that evening with Dr. Wells and another human Reth hadn't met before. The newcomer introduced herself as Dr. Liu, a specialist in what humans called crisis psychology. Admiral Stone tells me you've been having difficulty processing what you've learned about our society, Dr. Liu said gently. Difficulty. Reth repeated the word. Doctor, I have spent 40 years studying military science. I understand warfare, strategy, and the politics of power, but your species has broken every fundamental rule I know. Dr. Liu sat across from him, her manner calm and professional. Commander, what you're experiencing is what we call cognitive dissonance. Your existing knowledge framework cannot accommodate the new information you've received. Is that a disease? It's a normal psychological response. When core beliefs are challenged, the mind struggles to reorganize itself around new realities. Admiral Stone leaned forward. Commander, we want you to understand something important. Humanity wasn't always like this. We had to learn these lessons through terrible experience. Dr. Wells activated a holographic display showing historical images from human conflicts, cities reduced to rubble, battlefields covered with bodies, children starving in refugee camps. The images showed a species that had mastered destruction, but not construction. For thousands of years, we followed the same patterns as every other species in the galaxy, Stone said. Might makes right. Survival of the strongest. Conquest through superior firepower. The display shifted to show human weapons development through their history. Clubs and spears evolved into guns and explosives, then into chemical weapons and biological agents. The progression culminated in nuclear weapons that could destroy entire planets. We nearly ended ourselves, Dr. Wells said quietly. Not once, but dozens of times. We came so close to total extinction that we could measure our survival in minutes. Dr. Liu pointed to one particular image showing a devastated landscape. This was what we call the Great Revelation. The moment when humanity realized that ultimate weapons create ultimate vulnerability. I don't understand, Reth said. Any weapon powerful enough to guarantee victory is also powerful enough to guarantee mutual destruction, Stone explained. When everyone has planet killers, conflicts don't end with victory. They end with extinction. The historical review continued, showing how humanity had gradually developed their laws of war. Each rule had been written in response to a specific tragedy. Each limitation had been accepted to prevent even greater disasters. The rules weren't imposed on us by victors, Dr. Wells said. We created them ourselves out of desperation. Dr. Liu studied Reth carefully. Commander, you're struggling because you see our laws as weakness, but they represent the ultimate expression of strength. It takes true power to choose restraint. But you could have conquered the galaxy, Reth protested. You could have eliminated all threats to human security. And then what? Stone asked. Rule over a graveyard? Command an empire of dead worlds? The holographic display showed theoretical projections of galactic conquest scenarios. In every simulation, short-term human victory led to long-term collapse. Rebellion spawned more rebellions. Occupied worlds developed superweapons. The galaxy became increasingly unstable until final wars destroyed everything. We learned that peace cannot be imposed through force, Dr. Wells said. It must be chosen by everyone involved. That night, Reth experienced something he had never felt before. His mind seemed to be restructuring itself, discarding old assumptions and building new frameworks for understanding reality. The process was deeply disturbing, like watching his own thoughts being dismantled and rebuilt. Berg found him sitting on the floor of his quarters, surrounded by scattered reports and data pads. Commander, are you all right? I am trying to rewrite everything I know about warfare, Reth replied. It is more difficult than I expected. Maybe we should return to the ship, Berg suggested. Request transfer to a different assignment. No. The word came out with surprising force. We need to understand this completely. The galaxy needs to know what humanity really represents. Berg sat beside him. What do they represent, Commander? Reth was quiet for a long time. Hope, Lieutenant. They represent hope that intelligence can triumph over instinct, that cooperation can defeat competition, that mercy can be stronger than vengeance. And that terrifies you? It terrifies me because it means everything I believed about power was wrong. And if I was wrong about something so fundamental, what else don't I understand about the universe? Outside his window, human soldiers were ending their day with a ceremony Reth had observed several times. They gathered in formation and recited something they called the humanitarian oath. Their voices carried through the night air. We swear to protect the innocent, even when they cannot protect us. We swear to show mercy to the defeated, even when they showed us none. We swear to choose justice over vengeance, peace over victory, hope over fear. As their voices faded, Reth realized that his mission had fundamentally changed. He was no longer evaluating humanity as a potential threat to galactic stability. He was trying to understand whether their approach might be the key to saving the galaxy from itself. But first, he had to save his own sanity from the implications of what he had learned. The medical facility's walls were painted in soft, calming colors that reminded Reth of sunrise skies on his homeworld. Dr. Liu had explained that human psychiatric treatment focused on healing rather than control. Another example of their backwards approach to managing problems. Instead of suppressing his psychological crisis, they were helping him work through it. "How are you feeling today, Commander?" Dr. Liu asked as she settled into the chair across from his bed. "Different," Reth replied honestly. "My mind feels like it has been taken apart and reassembled with new components." 3 weeks had passed since his breakdown. 3 weeks of daily sessions with human doctors who treated his shattered worldview as carefully as they would treat a physical injury. They had shown him patience he didn't deserve and understanding he couldn't comprehend. "Dr. Liu, may I ask you something that has been troubling me?" "Of course. Why are you helping me?" "I am an alien intelligence officer sent to evaluate your species as a potential threat. Logic suggests you should interrogate me or send me away." Dr. Liu smiled, and Reth had learned to recognize the genuine warmth in human expressions. "Because you asked for help. When someone is suffering, we help them. It's really that simple. But I represent a potential enemy government. You represent a person in distress. Everything else is secondary." Reth closed his eyes and tried to organize his thoughts. The humans had spent weeks repairing psychological damage they hadn't caused, using resources they couldn't spare, helping someone who might use the knowledge against them. "I think I am beginning to understand," he said finally. "Understand what?" "Why your species survived when logic says you should have destroyed yourselves." "You don't think like warriors. You think like healers." Dr. Liu made notes on her datapad. "That's an interesting observation."
Can you explain what you mean?
"A warrior sees enemies to be defeated. A healer sees patients to be cured. You treat the galaxy like a vast hospital filled with sick civilizations that need treatment rather than conquest. And how does that make you feel?" Reth considered the question. "Hopeful. And terrified." "Why terrified?" "Because if you are wrong, your compassion will lead to your extinction. But if you are right, then every other species in the galaxy is thinking about survival in completely backward ways." That afternoon, Admiral Stone visited with news from the outside galaxy. "Commander, we've received several communications from your galactic command. They're demanding your immediate return." Reth nodded. He had expected this. "What did you tell them?" "That you're receiving medical treatment and will return when you're ready." They weren't happy with that answer. "I imagine not. Admiral, I need to ask you something directly. When I return to Galactic Command, what should I tell them about humanity?" Stone sat down and was quiet for several minutes. "Tell them the truth, Commander. Tell them that we could destroy the galaxy but choose not to. Tell them that we treat enemies as patients rather than threats. Tell them that we've learned something about survival that might help everyone. They won't believe me. Probably not. But maybe some of them will be curious enough to investigate further." Berg arrived that evening carrying official communications from home. "Commander, Command is ordering your immediate return. They're sending a ship to collect us." Reth read through the messages. The tone was increasingly concerned, then angry, then threatening. Galactic Command could not understand why their senior intelligence officer was receiving psychiatric treatment from the species he was supposed to be evaluating. "What are you going to tell them?" Berg asked. "I am going to tell them that humanity represents the most dangerous force in the galaxy," Reth replied, "and that we should do everything possible to avoid making them angry." "Sir?" "Think about it, Lieutenant. These humans have weapons that can destroy star systems. They have the technology to extinct entire species. They have achieved the ultimate goal of every military force in galactic history, and then they chose to use that power to grow gardens and heal wounded enemies." Berg looked confused. "I don't understand why that makes them dangerous." "Because it means they are not motivated by conquest or territory or resources. They are motivated by principles, and people who fight for principles are the most dangerous enemies possible." The next day brought Reth's final session with Dr. Liu. His mind felt stable for the first time in weeks, though completely reorganized around new concepts of power and strength. "How will you explain this experience to your superiors?" she asked carefully, Reth replied. "And probably unsuccessfully. Dr. Liu, may I ask you one final question?" "Of course." What happens if the galaxy doesn't learn the lessons that humanity has learned? What happens if other species continue to follow the old patterns of conquest and domination? Dr. Liu was quiet for a long time. We hope they'll choose differently. But if they don't, if they force us to abandon our laws of war? She shook her head. Commander, pray that never happens. Why? Because we remember how to be monsters. We just choose not to be. The transport ship that carried Reth and Berg away from New Terra was uncomfortable and cramped compared to human facilities. The crew treated them with the standard military efficiency that Reth had once considered normal. Now it felt cold and impersonal. During the journey home, Reth worked on his final report. How could he describe what he had learned? How could he make Galactic Command understand that humanity's apparent weakness was actually terrifying strength? He decided to focus on facts rather than interpretations. Human weapons capabilities, their treatment of prisoners and refugees, their voluntary restrictions on military power, their approach to conflict resolution. Let Command draw their own conclusions, but in a sealed section accessible only to the highest security clearances, he added his real assessment. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had learned to be strong enough to choose peace over victory. They had discovered that true security came not from the ability to destroy enemies, but from the wisdom to turn enemies into friends. The report concluded with a warning that Reth knew Command would probably ignore. Never give humanity a reason to abandon their laws of war. Never push them to the point where they decide that peace is impossible, because beneath their civilized exterior lay the capacity for destruction beyond imagination. When the ship docked at Galactic Command headquarters, Reth felt like a different person than the one who had departed weeks earlier. He had seen the future of warfare, and it looked nothing like what anyone expected. General Voss met them at the docking bay, his expression showing concern and suspicion. Commander Reth, your reports have been quite extraordinary. Command is eager to debrief you thoroughly. Of course, General. Tell me, Commander, do you believe the humans pose a threat to galactic stability? Reth looked out through the station's massive windows at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, humans were growing gardens on colony worlds, treating wounded enemies in their hospitals and teaching former pirates useful job skills. They were building a civilization based on mercy rather than conquest, healing rather than harm. General, he said finally, I believe humanity represents the only hope the galaxy has for long-term survival, but I also believe they are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. That seems contradictory, Commander. Yes, sir, it is. As they walked toward the debriefing chambers, Reth carried with him the memory of humans choosing restraint over revenge, mercy over destruction. He had seen ultimate power wielded with ultimate wisdom. He had witnessed a species that had learned to be strong enough to be gentle. The galaxy would probably not understand the warning he was about to deliver. Most species would continue following the old patterns of conquest and domination, but perhaps some would listen. Perhaps some would learn, and perhaps, if they were very fortunate, they would never discover what happened when humanity's infinite patience finally reached its limits, because Reth had seen their weapons. He had seen their capabilities, and he knew that the humans' greatest mercy was their refusal to use them. The galaxy could only hope that mercy would never be withdrawn.